now breaking in the online edition of The Times, because Bob Seeley, The Times reporting that Robert Jenrick has told friends that he's resigned over the emergency legislation doesn't go far enough. That will be a worry. How much of a worry?
Look, I'm really minded, and I'm sort of listening to what Mark is saying. I'm really minded for us all to stick together on this. This is an incredibly difficult issue. And the closer that we have bringing this to law, the more the vacuous heart of the Labour Party will be exposed. That simply throwing stones at government, it doesn't actually make you fit for office. That these are complex problems. You've got 100 million people globally on the move over the next few years. And we simply just cannot throw open our welfare state to anyone who can get here. There are some basic truths. Like Mark, I completely agree with what Mark was saying. Look, it's not great sending people, but we need to have a deterrent effect. And if you know that if you're basically an Albanian or an Afghan, and you've got to have thousands of pounds to come here, so you're effectively a middle-class economic migrant from an unstable country. If you come here paying that, and you know there's a reasonable chance that you're going to end up in Rwanda, you're either going to have to pay a lot more, or that model is going to be squeezed. But Mark, it's really, John, it's really important to note that this is just one of a series of measures. Yeah, we've now got 90% drop in Albanians because there's a returns policy to Albania. We're doing the returns policies with other countries as well. We're beefing up our relationship with the French as well. There's not one aspect of this is going to work, and the planes themselves, when they start to take off politically, it makes a massive difference in this country, especially I suspect with red wall voters, but even when the planes start to take off, and when the Labour Party then starts to split over this, which they will do, and the Keir Starmer comes under pressure, which he will do, and his vacuousness will be exposed, which it will be, that alone is not going to solve the problem. It's all of these things combined.
Yeah, of course. I mean, there will be a question as and when and if the planes do take off, will that have the required effect of deterring migrants from crossing the channel? While you're still with us, last word. We hear what you say, and ministers will be encouraged. I think those in the government will be encouraged by what both is weak as a measure. It seems the immigration minister may have resigned. That's going to undermine the impact the government wants it to have, won't it?
Yeah, for sure. Every time we do 2 steps forward, we get sort of 1 or sometimes 2 steps back. So it's not great. But the point is, we had the same issue with inflation. We've now got inflation down. We've got it down to half where it was. The small boats crossings already before the Rwanda bill today, they're down by 1/3. When in Europe they're up 80%. So we're absolutely swimming against the tide, if that's not the wrong metaphor and analogy to use here. Personally, I think Suella, I really liked her. I wish she stayed on as Home Secretary. She overplayed her hand. And the critical point for me in the 1922 committee, when I asked Rishi myself a couple of questions, the critical point here is that Rishi was saying we can't take it any further without risking the Rwandan side of the deal. And if we've got nowhere to send people, the policy doesn't take off. Yes. So we need to have somewhere to send people, and you need to, because Rwanda's taken a bit of a battering over this. And I think rightly the Prime Minister said, actually, they're pretty sensitive. And I will just raise one thing, John, very briefly. The tasteless remarks of some people in the SNP and the Labour Party, as soon as we're actually doing a deal with Rwanda for them to take people in there, all of a sudden, there's a sort of real sort of colonial style condescension from the left, banging on about how unsafe Rwanda is, what a dodgy country it is. Actually, it's really offensive stuff.
All right, Bob, as always, really good to get your thoughts. Mark Garnier, I'd like to hear what you think about the idea of, well, let's say these aeroplanes to Rwanda do take off at some point. I wonder how long that will take. I was talking earlier on, I know this is not a question one can answer definitively, but I was speaking earlier to Sir Nicholas Mostyn, a former High Court judge, and he thought, among other issues, was it would need to be shown that the Rwanda system was fit for purpose as set out in the treaty, and that would take time, maybe months.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, at the end of the day, as I say, my test is that when they start sending these planes out, that you see a significant drop off of the boats coming. So you never get to the point where you're using the full number of accommodations that you can have in the system. So it's going to take a bit of time. Look, as I say, even better is that just the idea that this has come through before you even send a single aeroplane out there, you suddenly see that the boats are dropping off, and then we can just handle all these existing migrants that are going through the claims at the moment. But look, it is going to take time. And Bob, again, you're seeing a glorious bit of unity across the wings of the Conservative Party here. Bob makes the point that this is one of a number of measures in order to try to stop this horrible practice of people smuggling by these criminal gangs.
Yes.
And we've got to make sure that people are safe. And look, actually, I'll tell you one thing which I do disagree with the government on. Actually, is that I think we should be spending more money on international development in order to try and make the lives of people better in countries where they're coming from, in order to incentivize them not to come. And that's something which I was very disappointed with the government when they cut the international aid budget.
I guess also another concern will be, I mean, the law is pretty clear. Courts are told to treat Rwanda as a safe country, but there's still space for individual asylum seekers who are put on a plane or meant to be put on a plane to Rwanda. They can individually appeal on the grounds that they may feel they are individually unsafe. I wonder how much of a chink in the armour that may turn out to be.
Well, it may well be, but John, you're going to have to ask somebody who really knows what they're talking about on that. Which, unfortunately, I'm a former investment banker, so I'm not I'm not the world's leading expert on international migration law. But look, we're going to have a debate coming up over all of this sort of stuff, and we've got some very smart people on both sides of the house who are going to be making exactly these points. I'm going to be spending my next sort of few weeks sitting there listening very carefully to some very smart people who can certainly help me form my view on this.
Yeah, and well, okay, and also I won't ask you to give me an expert legal opinion. As you say, you're a banker, not a lawyer. But the House of Lords, they will have to be negotiated when it comes to getting this piece of law through Parliament. And and I know there'll be all sorts of objections in the House of Lords.
Yeah, there will be. I mean, so there's an important point, I think, on this, which is that ultimately the House of Commons can invoke the Parliament Act in terms of pushing something through.
But that would take a year, Mark.
Yeah, no, I agree. But actually, much more. Even if it was really quickly, I think on something like this, it's a bad look if you invoke the Parliament Act on getting something like this through. At some point we've got to find some sort of accord. But nonetheless, what we mustn't do is find ourselves watering down whatever it is we come up with, so that it just doesn't work. We've got to make it work. But you're right, John. The House of Lords, again, there's a lot of very thoughtful people who make a very good contribution, and we've been a fan of them. We need to wait and see what they do, but we need to bring everybody together on this.
How important, lastly, Mark, how important is achieving success, as you would define it, achieving success to your chances of being at least competitive in the next general election?
Look, I mean, it is an issue in somewhere like Wild Forest. We've had 2 asylum hotels. I've been to both of them, and I've met with some of those people who've been, being housed there. I've also met with some volunteers who've worked extraordinarily hard, trying to, sort of accommodate people, make sure they got clothes, all that kind of stuff. So there's a great amount of compassion, but I also get a lot of emails from people who are worried that, potentially crime has gone up in Wild Forest. I mean, actually, crime a little bit of increase, but actually definitively not from the asylum seekers. Look, at the end of the day, people are, they worry about the fact that, you save all year to go on a, sort of 2-week holiday to Butlins or something, and yet an asylum seeker can come along and have a free 52-week year holiday. There's a perception that there's a lot of unfairness about this. So, is it going to be an electoral, kind of sort of huge issue? It's certainly going to be up there for 2 levels, one of which is so that people, I think, can see that the British government is. Also, people need to know that whoever is in charge is able to deliver on their promises and run the country in a sensible way. So I think to that extent, people will expect us to do very well. But look, we've got a few months to go before the general election. And the one thing I'm acutely aware of is that Keir Starmer, much as I like him and respect him, actually he's no Tony Blair, and he is. It's going to be an interesting election that I don't think is as much of a slam dunk as some of these opinion polls are suggesting.
All right, Mark Garnier, thank you for joining us and sharing your thoughts on the programme this evening. Interesting to hear those views from Mark Garnier, who is, if you like, on the One Nation, sort of more centrist wing of the Conservative Party, and Bob Seeley, more to the Conservative right wing, agreeing that this emergency legislation, they believe, will do what needs to be done. Both of them want to see planes in the air to Rwanda, and they're clearly willing to give their support to that. But doesn't mean the Tory party is going to be united. If it turns out, and this is the strong rumour and report, that the Immigration Minister has resigned, there will be a vocal faction, it seems, of on the right of the party who say the bill does not go fast enough, maybe not enough to stop it, but enough to cause fuss and cloud the government's message. And in the House of Lords, when that time comes, all sorts of obstacles waiting for the government and this piece of law. We're going to be talking about it in more detail on PNR and Friends right after 7. And tell me what you're thinking. Send me a text, 87222, start with the word Times. Tell me, what do you make of this new piece of law? Will the Rwanda plan, as it's now set out, get any further? Does it do it for you? Does it do nothing for you? Tell me, or tweet to @Times Radio. It's 6:53. This is Drive on Times Radio, and I'm John P.